going to meet him. And I was concerned. I thought we probably, with this topic, only need a closet. Pardon? Is it on? Can you hear me? Obviously it's not on then. Can you hear me now? See, in that closet, you'd be able to hear me better. If you were here for the previous presentation, it was on Prezi. And my presentation is done in Prezi, so you'll get to see what a Prezi presentation might look like. Now notice I didn't say what a good Prezi presentation might look like, because I'm not sure at this point. I want to talk about 5 applications that you can use in teaching a class.
Leaders. Well, here's a good example. We switched to FedEx Ground, which has the fastest ground service to the most businesses in the U.S. So, Jim, what are we?
Leaders?
Yes. Nancy, what are we?
Leaders.
Yeah. It's a process.
Relax, it's FedEx.
That was supposed to come up halfway through the presentation. One of the situations that occurs in education is, I think faculty want to do a better job in teaching. We want to find other ways that we can assess students. But when it comes right down to it, we always fall back on what we know best. And what is it that we know best? Hold on, we're going to start the presentation where it should be. How much of a textbook do you want your students to know? Pardon? All of it. You want them to know everything in that textbook. Anybody disagree? Anybody have another number?
Whatever you want them to know at that point in time.
You can want them to know 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%, 10%. The problem is that the textbook that really determines the course. Faculty tend to use a lot of test banks. How many of you use test banks? I use test banks. Why do we use them? Well, they're easy. They're right there. They save time. They're self-graded. Have the students do multiple choice, run it through a Scantron, bingo. It's all graded for you. Saves a lot of time. And they're free. And of course, as faculty, what do we like most? Something that's free. So it's easy to see why test banks are popular. When you're using test banks, then you're kind of stuck pretty much with multiple choice. Now, of course, there is every test bank that I've seen, and my background is in teaching economics. So if you want to fall asleep, don't worry, I'm used to it. I taught microeconomics at 8 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, discussion earlier, should we let students use computers in class and that? I was happy when they were on the computer because I knew they were awake. Test banks, besides multiple choice, have one other type of test available. True and false. If you can't mess with their mind with multiple choice, start giving them true and false. Not many test banks have essay questions. Not many of them have short answer questions. When you're dealing with the test bank, you're trying to find 50. We got some instructors who teach online who like to find 125 questions. 125 questions to assess how much a student has learned over a couple lessons, a couple units. And when you're forced to find that many questions in a test bank, you end up trying to find obscure questions in the book. Now, this week in the paper, in Dear Abby, there was somebody wrote in about tests. And this was the headline on that article. I don't know if anybody read that Dear Abby this week. Performance on exams is the true test of a student's education. How well they do on an exam tells you how well they're doing in class. I don't happen to think that's true.
Oh, there must be some place in this book I can find obscure passages I could test the students on.
This guy that uses 125 questions can't find 125 questions over the course outcomes. So what he does is he goes through the book trying to find obscure questions in the book that he can test students on. And you know why he wants to test them that way? Anyone have a guess why Charlie likes to test them that way? Why he looks for those? Why? See if they've read the book. Is that what we want students to do in our class? Do we just want them to read the book? I've done some testing several years ago for a class in grad school to find out how many students read the textbook. 85% of the students that I surveyed admitted they did not read the textbook. Now, this wasn't just in an econ class. It would have really been much higher if it were just econ. But I tested over 5 different disciplines. 85% of them did not read the textbook. You know where they got the learning? From the lecture, from the discussion, from class interaction. Now, as an economist, it bothers me that students will pay $125 and not open a textbook. But the bottom line is, I wasn't there to have them read a textbook. I wanted them to learn the course outcomes. And the course outcomes is what I talked about in class. The question we need to ask is, do we want to test them on a book or on the course outcomes? If somebody had tested me on some of the econ books I read in graduate school, I don't think I would have done very well on those questions, because textbooks are built to fit a lot of different schools. The outcomes are not all common in every school. Books have outcomes that are set by the publisher. The courses have outcomes that are set by the institution. And my job was not to test how well these students did for the publisher, but how well they did for the institutional outcomes in the course.
Does everyone know what this is? Well, it's a lemming. From now on, we're not going to be lemmings. We're going to be leaders. Well, here's a good example. We switched to FedEx Ground, which has the fastest ground service to the most businesses in the U.S. So, Jim, what are we?
Leaders?
Yes. Nancy, what are we?
Leaders.
Yeah. It's a process.
Relax, it's FedEx.
I'm not going to apologize for showing that twice, because I think that is one of the best commercials I've ever seen for FedEx. I want to show you 5 things that you can use in your class to help teach the class and help to assess how students are doing in class. About 5 years ago, I went away from standardized tests and started asking essay questions and short answer questions. And then I discovered that there were a lot of other things that I could do that might engage the students and help me understand whether or not they're learning, and in fact check and see if they're learning. And so we're going to take a look at these 5. Now, the first one is Prezi. This is what I'm using. Now, if you were here earlier, they showed you how Prezi works. Prezi is free. You can get an educational version of Prezi. It's free. We like that, don't we? We like stuff that is free. You can do, I like this better than PowerPoint. Now, I have my mouse certification from Microsoft in PowerPoint. I've taught PowerPoint. PowerPoint has a place. But frankly, I hate turning students loose with PowerPoints. In my previous job, I hated turning faculty loose with PowerPoints. Because you know what happens? You try to see how many words you can get on a page. And you put a slide up, and I'll tell you, you ought to leave any lecture when a presenter says, I know you can't read this, but I've put it up anyway. Prezi doesn't allow you to do that. It's a lot harder to do. So you get away from some of those bad habits by using Prezi. If you want to do Prezi and stream it, you can create a Prezi, use something like Jing, a screen capture, and run the Prezi on your computer and narrate it. Now, Jing will only let you go 5 minutes. That's plenty long for any presentation that you're going to be doing. But you can do some creative things. In this Prezi, I had a YouTube video that we embedded. I had a movie that I made that was embedded. I don't think you need as much Dramamine as you could with some of the stuff you do with Prezi. But Prezi is different, and students are becoming aware of it. Animoto. How many of you heard of Animoto? I found Animoto 4 years ago, and it is an incredible piece of technology. With Animoto, you upload images. You can do pictures. You can also do PowerPoint, save it as a JPEG, upload that. You can find pictures off of the internet. I always advise students about issues of copyright. But you can create an Animoto video. Guess how much it is? Free. Now, for free, you can do a 30-second video. But as an educator, you can contact Animoto and say, can I get an Animoto license for my class? And they will send them a code, and students will have 6 months that they can access and use Animoto for, say it with me, free. Now, the nice thing about Animoto is it can create some just amazing slideshows. This is the Animoto homepage. From this page, you can go in and create some great shows. Now, I'm going to show you a slideshow. I have my students in my econ class, their final project, the last exam before the final exam. I always hated giving an exam over material and then having a final exam a week later. I mean, I figure they've already been abused enough just by taking econ. There's no need to draw extra blood. So what I do is I have them in microeconomics. At the end of the semester, we are studying things like social welfare programs, ag econ, environmental economics, labor economics. So what I do in agricultural economics, what I do is I tell students, you can team up with somebody else. I want you to create an Animoto video. It must be, I think it's 3 minutes long, on one of those topics. Let me show you the video the two girls came up with. They came up with it on anti-poverty programs.
Work is done. Get what you have to do, and enjoy the view. Hit this one out of the park. One step back, another is changing for you. What are you gonna do? So let it ride, let it feel right. It sounds good to me. I say let it fly, go with the moment. Feel like taking a second at a time. Go with the moment. Feel like making it good, yeah, let it fly. Go with the moment. There's no other place to be. So go with the moment. Catch that one, ride it alone. Just have some fun. Get what you have to do, and enjoy the view. Hit this one out of the park. You know circumstance always a change for you. What are you gonna do? So let it ride, let it feel right. It sounds good to me.
Now, these girls came from a upper middle class background. Their comment to me when they did the presentation was, we didn't know there are that many agencies that help people in Reno County. Now, there was no way I could have taught them that in class. I could have talked about those agencies. They drove all over town, all over the county, took pictures of the facilities, and got information on them. I think they learned more about social welfare that's available in the community by doing that than they would have had I given them a test. And you know what? They had fun doing it. Now, you may have noticed there's music to this. Good. What you do is you upload your pictures, you select your music, and Animoto puts all that together. All those fancy turns, fade ins, fade outs, it's all done by Animoto. If you don't like the way it looks, you can hit redo, and it'll redo it for you again. Animoto is just incredible. Now, I did an Animoto of my grandchildren and posted it on Facebook. My daughter called me and she said, wow, I know you do this stuff in your field, but I didn't know how creative you were. And I said, thank you. You don't have to let the secret out of the bag. But Animoto is another way that you can assess students by giving them class. Now, Comic Life. How many of you heard of Comic Life? Comic Life, unfortunately, is free for 30 days. But if you're an educator, you can, rather than paying $30, you can get a license for $20. Now, what I did with Comic Life was I thought, I need to find some way to get students a little bit more engaged. And so what I did is I created an assignment for them. And to do the assignment, I created my own comic, Microman or Macroman. What I asked them to do was to find some topic or element of aggregate supply and aggregate demand of the course or outline of the comic. They had to do it in one page. You can do all of the this language stuff, you know, the boxes and that. That's all there in Comic Life. I had two students, when they submitted their comic to me, both of them said, you know, at first I thought this was a dumb idea. And then I realized how difficult it was to find some concept, some element of aggregate supply and aggregate demand and put it into a comic. Now, I didn't grade them, the whole semester grade wasn't based on their comic, but that was one way to engage them by using comic life. Photobabble. Photobabble is a really interesting software program, because with Photobabble, what you do is you can take a photograph or a series of photographs and you can create a talking stream. For example, oh, hold on, I've got the wrong username. I'm not 4, 44. Oh, not right. Okay. Here's a couple photobabbles that I made.
This is a picture I took through the glass at the Oklahoma Aquarium in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Now, just an example, that's not exciting, but you can link to the photobabble or you can embed a photobabble into a website. Now, I had used these in my econ class. I just posted them for students to use.
This is a photograph of the first Bank of the United States, which was established in 1791 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This bank was the first movement towards a Federal Reserve system in this country, but because of the fear people had of banks, when its charter ran out 20 years after it was started in 1811, a proposal to renew the charter failed by a single vote in each house of Congress.
Now, what I did is I uploaded that into my econ class. It's a web-supported class. So I had some pictures that I had taken of Federal Reserve banks around the country. You just upload those in the class. It makes it, I think, a little bit more interesting. And you can use this for students to submit assignments back to you. You know, they can, as long as they've got an image that they can get into Photobabble. And by the way, it costs free. Another way to assess students. Now, this last one, I love this one. Blabberize. Have any of you heard of Blabberize before? This is a great. With Blabberize, you can make images talk. Now, the volume on this is low, so I'm going to bring it up and hope that it's low. Now, what I've done is, this is my daughter and her husband's, my youngest daughter and her husband's dog.
Ruff, ruff, ruff. Hello. This is an example of how you can take a cute picture of a cute little doggy like me and have me talk and explain things to people. Isn't this cute? See, you can do this too. You can be cute. Give it a try.
Now, these things, you can share these. They can be embedded, they can be bookmarked, you can link to them. I showed this to the education instructor who teaches at Hutch Community College. She had one of her students do their final project using Blabberize. I had a student use Blabberize. He took a picture of Alan Greenspan and had Alan Greenspan explain what he thought was wrong with what the Fed was doing today. I mean, it's cute, but you know, when you're doing something like this, when you're doing Blabberize or you're doing Photobabble or Animoto or Comic Life, you've got to think, if you're doing that as a project to be graded, you've got to think about the material you're using. And unlike a paper, where you get a lot of dumping, where students aren't really sure what the answer is, they just load a lot of information out there. With something like this, you've got to be concise, precise, and aimed at the point you want to get across. Now, students have fun with this kind of stuff because they play with this kind of stuff all the time. And I give them the option to use one of these for a project, and I have never had a student say, I'd rather write the paper instead. And I have enjoyed this, watching this, more than I enjoy reading a paper. Because when I read a paper, then I've got to start doing grammar, punctuation, and as we said earlier today, you know how kids write today. Yes, ma'am. Yes, with all these, they have to turn in a works cited, or bibliography, I don't know what that means. I tell them I want a works cited, and for those who don't understand, I just want some kind of reference from where you got the material. Amazingly, a lot of those references come from the book that they don't read. But you know, when they've got to find out something specific, guess where they go to find it out? If they haven't got it in class, they go to the book. See, I'm forcing them indirectly to go to the book. And I think this really encourages them, and I think it inspires them, and I think they honestly appreciate it more than standardized tests. And again, I don't base all my grade in a class on things like this, but I like to throw things like this into a class. You know, when I'm teaching a class, I do video clips and play those. First day of class, I introduce myself with my gangster hoodie on. I share a birthday with one of my favorite singers, Eminem. And we're both from Michigan, and I know where 8 Mile is. He lived on 8 Mile. But, you know, I've got just a little short video clip that I play that I hope engages students. Now, I want to share one other thing with you. How many have ever heard of this website? I want you to say, oh, I hate that crap, he's just covered it. I'm not going to use that. Here's something you will use. Sit or Squat. This is a website that you can go to. You can also get it on your iPhone or your Droid. This shows you where toilets are in the area, and they're rated whether you should sit or squat, which my wife tells me is an important thing for most women. Now, this automatically brought us right up to where we're located here. It does the same thing on your cell phone. And it tells you, here's a Starbucks at 9932 College Boulevard, and you see it's green. Have a seat, folks. This over here, the Overland Park South BP, I guess that's a gas station. Because of the oil spill, it's a squat. So I didn't want you to leave here without some knowledge that would be of use for you in your life. Now, there is a place that, if you're not familiar with this, you ought to be. go to web2.0.net. This is an index of web applications. You can go to this website and it lists out applications. It has an index that you can use. You can find applications for audio. You can find applications for most anything. And it'll search through all the applications it has. And it's pretty current. It also reviews the applications. I check that on a regular basis. In fact, I've friended it, or I like it on my Facebook, so it tells me whenever a new application has been unveiled. Some of them are just ridiculous. It's, after all, the web. But some of them are very useful. And I would encourage you, if you haven't done something like that, or would like to see what kinds of things are available, I would encourage you to go to Web 2.0 and see what's out there. Do you have any questions? Anything on the, yes ma'am? I give the students a rubric. And things like the Animoto that has music, I want music that goes with the pictures. And they've always been pretty successful. But, I tell them how many images I want. I tell them that, I want the images and the music to match. And I want there to be some point or purpose to the Animoto. Same thing with the other ones. So I create a different rubric for each one of those. And that rubric varies from semester to semester. Yes, ma'am?
Does the Animoto site have music, or do you have to upload?
No, Animoto site has the music. And it's all copyright approved. It tends to be bar bands, for lack of a better term, that have just recorded music. And it's by genre. So you can go in and you can find hard rock, find jazz, you can find country, you can find Latin. It really has a very wide range of music that's available. I just think the world of Animoto. Anyone else have a question? Yes, ma'am. Do they require what? I'm sorry? Oh, that's another nice thing. None of these, except Comic Life can be a download, but the rest are not. They're out in the cloud, and we like to use those because most colleges and universities don't like you just downloading things willy-nilly, unless you know somebody who will give you the right to be willy-nilly. I think, and here's an idea, there's the entertainer, which is, you know, nice music.
Can you determine how long each slide stays on so that it goes really fast? Can you control that?
Yes, you can, there's a way to double the time a slide is up. And you can repeat a slide, you know, if you want. But it puts it together. If you don't like it, you run it again. And I thought that was nice because, you know, this kid showed not only food, but agriculture involved, tobacco, paper, pencils, things like that. Anyway, any other questions? He stood up, so I got one more to blow the speakers. No. Yes. Yeah. As long as you want. I tell them 3 minutes because that's my attention span's starting to wane around 250, 3 minutes. Yes.
Your opening slide, where it shows the 5 A's.
I downloaded that from online and just put the text across the front of it. It's copyright free. Anyone else have any questions? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope you learned something.